Welcome everybody to another episode of the 𝗍𝙗𝗃𝗍 podcast. I'm really excited to be doing this Women in Property series that I've been running for a couple of weeks now. And as the weeks go on, I'm speaking to some really amazing ladies in property. And it kind of amazes me that how many ladies are doing such fantastic projects and the scale at some of the projects these ladies are working at and the knowledge they have. And, you know, it amazes me that they don't actually put a lot of this out onto social. They like to keep it all kind of hidden in the background and not talk about it. But the point of this series is just to bring it across that, you know, we've got a lot of women out there that are doing big things. And, you know, we always see men posting about this development, that development. But, you know, when this series drops, you're going to see that there's some really, really big projects that women are involved in. They just don't shout about it enough. I'd like to take full credit for this series, but I can't, because the Women in Property idea actually came from my wife, who said to me, "Hey, James, you know, you haven't got too many women on the podcast and you need to get out there and speak to some ladies because they're doing some amazing things out there. And I think it'd be very, very beneficial for the listeners." So today I'm joined by Jess Leader from Next Level Living. Welcome, Jess, to the 𝗍𝙗𝗃𝗍𝗍 podcast.
Hey, James. Hi, nice to see you.
Great. Thank you very much for joining me. Jess, most people ask about your background to start with. I'm going to flip it up and I'm going to work it backwards and ask you, why do you do what you do and what is the end goal for you in property?
That's such an interesting question to start with, because actually I've realised recently that why I do what I do has a different reason to what I've learned, you know, that I'm doing it for a different reason than I originally set out. So what I originally set out to do was create financial freedom for myself, that well-used, well-loved phrase, because having worked kind of in a corporate role for a long time and not really owning my time, I really wanted to change that. So originally it was about creating money for myself, creating freedom for myself, and also proving to myself that I could do something for myself, where I don't come from a background where that's the norm. So I really wanted to prove that. And then as time's gone on, that makes me sound like a really old woman, but you know, in the few years that I've been working in property, I realised that that's changed, and there's two things really. Firstly, it's about the proving that I can has shifted quite a lot. That used to have quite a lot of external validation in it, what other people thought of me, what I was showing other people I could do, and that's shifted a lot more to what I think of me and what I am, my own levels of satisfaction in myself. So there's a kind of change from like an external to an internal assessment and judgment of myself, I suppose. So that's changed, but also it's not just about finance anymore. I've realized that there's a massive connection between me providing homes for people and also the nurturing, I suppose, side of me that really wants people to feel safe and to flourish and to grow and to develop. And, you know, putting those two together, I want to create as many environments as I can where people can feel like that and really kind of live out their potential.
No, that's a great why. I mean, I touched on it briefly with you earlier. Just going through your Instagram feed, you can tell when you post something that you very much consider a space for a person. And how they're going to interact with that space or how they're going to live in that space, where I think a lot of the developers make a mistake of they just look at square meter sizes and think, you know, I'll have a bedroom, bathroom, I'll make X amount, and they don't really care about the person. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, as you know, I've literally come from a site meeting now, but below this is like dust, building site covered shorts. But one of the things we were talking about, this is a flip actually, it's not an HMO, but we were like, okay, so when you come in the front door, where are you going to put your shoes and your coat? Because otherwise, like, how does that work? How do you live in this space? And where do you do, you know, your daily things that are just automatic habits? How does this space facilitate the ease of those things? So yeah, very much so. Every detail is considered. Like, where do you hang up your coat? Where do you put your shampoo? How do you move around? How does the sound travel? All of those things, very much considerations. Some people, as you say, some people don't do them, and it probably is much less of a headache for them. But for me, I'd have such satisfaction and pride in knowing that I'm creating a space that works. That's a big important factor for me.
Yeah, I feel I'm with you on that one. I mean, some of my early HMOs are they're not like that. I'm not going to lie. They are just rooms and they're just let out. But as I've gone on this journey, I've realized that, you know, you need to live in that space and work it out yourself. So one of the things I actually do is I'll go and spend a week in a building before we turn it into a HMO. And then I'll spend some time in that building while stuff's going on, so that I'm kind of interacting. And also when it comes towards the end, I'll spend some time in there. Like you say, little things like shampoo, you know, you put an ensuite on, and 9 times out of 10, you might forget to have some kind of contraption there that's going to hold all your goods. And, you know, you can't expect someone just to have the shampoo at the bottom of the shower tray. It just doesn't work. For number one, it doesn't look too great. And, you know, number two, it's just not functional. So I see what you're saying in terms of kind of really almost digesting the space yourself and working out how somebody's going to flow through it. And my wife's really good at this, because she always says to me, James, I think you need to take a bedroom out and have a really nice communal space. And I'm like, oh, I really want to keep the bedroom. And then, you know, then when you start thinking about it, people, they've got to live together. And I think this is the difference of a HMO and a really nice co-living workspace, which you kind of refer to in your Instagram feeds.
Yeah, I mean, it's things like, you know, in an HMO, do you want to put the head of someone's bed literally the other side of a wall, which is a corridor or a walkway or a shower or something, where they're going to get disturbed all the time, the front door's going to bang, or people are going to be rushing up and down the stairs with their stuff, and it's going to disturb different shift pattern sleeps. You know, you have to think about those things, because yes, you know, it creates a really lovely environment, but it creates, from a financial perspective as well, it means that people are prepared to pay a little bit more rent, and also hopefully your churn and your tenure is higher. Well, churn's lower and tenure's higher. Of you know, they don't have the extra faff and costs of tenants moving in and out. So it's kind of a win-win. It works financially and it works for the tenants, and it's a really nice environment as well. So I don't know why you wouldn't, but as you say, a lot of people don't. And I've seen, you know, en suites where you can't get to the shower because the toilet's there because it's so squashed in, or can't open the fridge door properly because it's too squished against whatever. So yeah, just think about it.
Jess, I'm laughing because where you said you can't get to the shower room because the toilet's in the way, I actually made that mistake in one of them previously. And you had to extend the wall out, and it was a HMO officer that picked it up. So I'm laughing because I've actually done that before, where there's such a tight space and you think to yourself, you know, I could squeeze around here, but you don't realize it's actually a slip hazard, it's a trip hazard. If someone falls out of the shower, they're going to hit their head. But yeah, I've been there, I've done that.
But that's the best way you learn. You're never going to make that mistake again.
No, totally. So Jess, you're one of those amazing people that has a job as well as a career in property. Now, I hear it all the time where people say, you know what, I haven't got enough time to do this property malarkey. You know, you're a prime example of someone who's still working in a full-time job and you're running a property business. Can you tell the listeners what it is that you actually do for your full-time job, and how you made the transition, or how you're slowly making the transition into property for a full-time career?
Yeah, sure. So I work in marketing. I've worked in marketing for 15 years. I've worked in different kind of types of different kind of channels around within the marketing industry. And when I actually don't work full-time anymore. Well, at the moment I'm furloughed, but I actually don't work full-time anymore. About a year ago, I moved down, because of property, I moved down to 4 days, which has been an amazing change, just having that extra day. And also I'm lucky enough to, me and my boss have a long-standing relationship, and she trusts me to work really flexibly. So I'm able to really choose how I apportion my time within a week. But that hasn't always been the case. So there's been a lot of, you know, 7 o'clock site meetings, 9 o'clock in the office, lunch break on the phone to a broker, you know, evenings planning your viewing day for the Saturday, making the calls on another lunch, and then working late, and weekends. I'm definitely not unique in that happening, but that's how I've done it. And I think that's how everybody does it. And for a long time, I did everything. I've been outsourcing quite a lot of things for about a year now, which has also made a massive difference. So from being honestly overwhelmed and also honestly a lot slower in progressing than I thought that I would be in my head. And I was all fired up as like, you know, I finished my education and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do all these things in 2 years. And I didn't. And that was really demotivating for me. But I think you know, we all keep going. And I think the realistic side of, you know, having a life actually, and relocating cities and changing jobs and still having a full-time career, it does take time out. It's doable, it's definitely doable, and there are lots of people who've done more than me and lots of people who've done less than me, and I think having those people who have done more is a good is a healthy inspiration and also an unhealthy comparison to where you are yourself. But outsourcing and realizing what I could free up from myself was a massive thing. But since going down to 4 days, that's made a huge difference as well. And probably I outsource at least a day's worth of stuff a week to a VA or another. So, and at the moment, as I say, having been furloughed, I've been able to make quite a lot of changes in the business, which has been amazing, which is, it's kind of like a dangled carrot of what it could be like if I only did property. So that's been interesting to think about as well.
Couple of things you said there, Jess, that I want to pick up on. Before I go, I want to touch upon education, but before I go there, you said, you talked about using a VA and kind of subcontracting stuff out and, you know, getting stuff off your plate. I'm very much for VAs. I absolutely love them. I took my first one off on just a couple of weeks before we went into lockdown, and it is absolutely the best thing I've ever done in my life. I know about her life. I know, right? 100%. And it's like, she's the first person I speak to in the morning and generally the last person I speak to at night, which is really bad when you've got a wife, because it's like having another wife in a sense. Like, she knows so much about me. I know so much about her. And we just work really, really well. And she's from the Philippines, like a lot of people have VAs from the Philippines. And she does so many things a lot better than me. And, you know, you get into that mindset where you think, oh, you know what, I can do this really well. I can do it much better than anybody else. But what you realize is when you spend some time teaching a VA or, you know, putting together some kind of training program, you find that, wow, you know, for £3 or £4 an hour, she has given me back 2 or 3 hours of my time. And ultimately, everybody goes into property, and 9 times out of 10, I hear from them, I want so much, I want time. My end goal is to have time to travel. And my kind of thing to them is always, well, you could have time now. You know, you could get a VA for 20 hours a month, and, you know, 20 hours over the year, you're gaining days and weeks. You can build time for yourself. What's your opinion? What's your opinions on VAs?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm a total advocate of VAs. I understand that, you know, I understand that people feel reluctant to let go of some things, but why? Why do you feel reluctant? Do you really need to do those things? You know, like the research or data analysis or bookkeeping or admin or emails, or even, you know, your VA booking this time for us together. Why do you need to do that? You don't. It doesn't take away your power or whatever. I don't know why people are so hung up to outsource so many things. I understand, you know, having been a project manager for quite a long time, I'm a massive control freak. I'll hold my hands up to that. But even with that kind of trait, it's so releasing and amazing just to not feel so much stress all the time. And in having a VA, since having a VA, Tej asked me once if there was a return on investment for my VA, and I don't have that, but it's allowed me to meet with more investors or spend my time on much more valuable things like learning the development plans of the cities that I've been working in, which I didn't have time to do when I was spending all my time trying to book viewings and analyze numbers and blah, blah, blah. I didn't have time to do all of that. So it's elevated the type of role I play. It's that work on your business in your business thing, isn't it? So yeah, it's been absolutely game changing. And since I've you know, shared with a few people what I've done and how much it's changed my life, people have asked me to help them get their own VA, and they're then realizing that actually the impact is huge and they wish they'd done it months, weeks, years ago, whatever.
Yeah, it's just an amazing feeling. I mean, I was very reluctant when I first took her on, but one thing I would say to all the listeners is if you're taking on a VA, do block out some time to really spend some time teaching them and, you know, putting some training manuals together. We have a Trello board where we manage everything through a Trello board. We've got videos on there, screen recordings. We record every Zoom call we have. And it's just building up this massive bank of resources. And we're actually in the process of taking on a second VA who's actually a bloke this time, who's going to be doing some video bits for us. And it's just so nice because, like you said, you get your life back. You're in control of your life again, you know. And you think, sometimes I used to think like, oh damn, I got this podcast that needs to go out this morning. I can't go and do this because it's got to go out at 6 in the morning, or it's got to do this. And you're just like, now it's just like, hey, Christy, can you deal with this for me? And she's like, hey, no problem, James. And before you know it, it's done. And she's got stuff scheduled up. And it's, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I'm a big advocate like yourself to outsourcing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a really important thing that you said, a really important point that you made, which people sometimes underestimate, which is you can't just hire a VA and then go, that's it, they're done, they know what to do. Because like when you start any job, even if you're skilled in that skill set, you don't know how your new company wants you to work or how the processes and systems work of a new company. So there's still an element of training. So even if you're bringing on a skilled, experienced VA into your business, you still need to invest that time teaching them. These are the expected, you know, this is what my preferences are, this is my criteria, these are the outputs I expect, these are the formats that we work to. And that's a two-way conversation to arrive at those things, but there still needs to be training. I think people sometimes feel overwhelmed at the idea of investing the time in getting to that point. But once you've invested the time once, as you say, then it's just off your plate forever.
Yeah, and lastly on VAs, what I say is your VA is only as good as how good you are in teaching them, because don't just think they're going to come on board and make your life, they do make your life fantastically easy, but you've got to invest a lot of time to make sure, like you said, they're prepped up, they know what they're doing, how they handle stuff. And yeah, so your VA is only as good as you are.
Yes. And actually, I know you said one more last point, but if I can sneak in another.
Yeah, of course you can. Yes, yeah, of course you can.
One thing that I was so surprised about as a kind of bonus benefit, I suppose, of having a VA was it made me move faster. So having to give, once you've committed to a VA, they're planning their income in their household each month. So you need to deliver them a certain amount of hours each month to work. And so making sure I had enough stuff. Yes, there's repetitive weekly tasks, but there's also other things. So making sure I had enough work for her to do all the time made me get through work more quickly in my business. So I didn't expect that. I was sort of accountable to her. So if I didn't brief her or if I didn't have her information ready, that wouldn't get done. And I would sort of be letting her down, which was letting me down because my business wasn't moving quickly enough. So it's propelled me. I didn't know that there would be that level of accountability that would have the bonus of me moving more quickly through business tasks. Yeah, it's been good.
It almost gives you a kick up the arse, doesn't it, to get stuff done that you would normally think, oh, you know what, I'll stick this on my Trello board and I'll put it into pending or upcut, and it constantly gets moved around. And it's one of those ones you get
into my Trello board, Jay.
No, mine's exactly the same. You know, there's always that one thing that's getting moved about. And as soon as Christy came on board, it's like when you've got a 7 o'clock meeting with her in the morning, you're either getting up at 5 or 6 to prepare for that meeting, or you're doing it the night before, because she's going to be raring to go with a load of questions. And if you're not prepared, you're just going to look silly, and you would have paid her for a couple of hours on a Zoom call, and you've actually got nothing done. So it gave me a massive kick up the rear end to get things in order.
It really does. So yeah, if that's what you want in your business, that's a great way to kick up the arse. Definitely.
So Jess, you mentioned education, that you got a load of education, and then am I right, you said for about 2 years you didn't really do anything with it?
No, I did. Perhaps I didn't explain that correctly. I did do something with it straight away, but I moved at a slower rate than I thought that I would. In hindsight, I think there was quite a few reasons for that. Partly, I just didn't really believe in myself, actually. It's probably the biggest reason that I didn't do as much as I could. And I think I underestimated how valuable the existing skills I had could be in a new career. And so I thought I knew less than I did, and that kind of paralyzed me a little bit, and I didn't really have the confidence to move forward and make quick enough decisions. And I took a formal property education, and had a mentor and had quite a strong network around me. So I had the support around me. I can only surmise, I suppose, that it came down to I didn't act confidently enough. I didn't have enough confidence in myself to move forward. And so quite quickly after my education, I did an HMO. And so I got going, but my momentum was just so much slower than I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You say you had, would you say you suffered with a little bit of self-belief then? You kind of just didn't believe you could do it? Okay.
Which is really strange, because I'm not an unconfident person. I'm not shy, I'm not unconfident. I have a level of belief in myself, and from being in a few sticky situations in life, I know that when the shit hits the fan, I always pull through. I always get myself out of it. So for me, I've also learned that backing myself into a corner is a great way for me to move forward. You know, or in a redundancy, you came up with a plan as an example of that. But there was just something, it was a different type of confidence that I didn't know I lacked until I wasn't really doing as much as I thought I would. But I wasn't inactive. I was making the bookings for the viewings, and I was analysing deal after deal, and I saw deals that stacked, or I just didn't move. I don't know why, I just didn't move forward enough. And I'm a very, very analytical person, and it was as though what switched for me in the last sort of year is looking at a deal and understanding I've always understood the risks, but I think I didn't trust myself enough to overcome the risks. I think it's that type of confidence as well. And now I'm like, okay, these are the risks. They might be the same set of risks, but I have confidence in myself to overcome them or turn a negative into a positive now, which I suppose I didn't necessarily have as a newbie. And just, the belief that, so partly I suppose that's technical knowledge, and partly that's just self-belief. And I think there was a lot of comparison that I was doing, and thought, I'm not as good as X, Y, and Z, and that kind of, I put myself down a lot, and I didn't really need to do that. Didn't really need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I touch on mindset, because that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, what's your opinions on mentors, coaching, and education programs in the property field? Because recently there's obviously been a lot of things on the socials and on YouTube, and people like to call them gurus and all sorts. So it's one of those topics that always gets a lot of hype. I mean, I'm an advocate for education and mentors. I personally have a mentor myself, someone who keeps me in check, someone I can call upon when I need them. What's your opinions on them?
I remember hearing you on a different hearing or podcast that you were on, actually, where you talked about in your print business how you wish you'd listened to your mentor earlier. Or brought a mentor on board earlier to have them to listen to in the first place. I'm a big fan. I'm a massive advocate in choosing the right mentor. But actually, I think a lot of the support that you might need from a mentor or coach doesn't necessarily, it can come in lots of different formats. It can come in a close network of, a mastermind group, or a mentor one-on-one, or a group mentorship, or podcasts, or mindset gurus. You can do a lot of things without if it's a blocker that you don't feel like you can invest in a one-on-one mentor, which I think sounds like we both have. There are lots of ways to get that, but it's absolutely key to me in unlock. You don't know what you don't know, and it kind of unlocks a whole nother level of looking at a project, or looking at a problem that you just didn't know existed, which is fantastic. And you can get that, as I say, in a lot of different ways. I think at the moment, particularly at the moment, everyone's becoming a mentor or a guru, or you can pay anyone for time to tell you stuff these days. And so you have to be really careful and do your due diligence on that person beyond the level you think you should. And I always I heard somebody say a while back, you should always get a mentor who's doing the strategy that you want to do, or strategies that you want to do, who's just a bit ahead of you. So, you know, maybe a couple of years, or, you know, a dozen more deals or something, not like 500 properties, because it's about relatability and understanding your next step. And it's okay if your mentor needs to change from year 1 to year 5 to year 10, that's okay. You don't need someone who can show you what you don't need to know yet for 5 years. I think it's important to get the right one for you.
Mm-hmm. So how do you spot a good one and how do you spot a bad one then?
I think, well, on the surface level, it are they doing what they say they can teach you to do? Do they walk the walk as well as talk the talk? And I think we need to tune into our gut instincts a little bit and just realize who's full of shit, basically, and try and filter those people out. And unfortunately, a lot of fake mentors are quite good at sales, so it becomes harder to do that. But I think just understand that they are actually doing what they say they're going to do, and talk to other people, understand the reputation, speak to some of their previous clients or mentees, or whatever the product they've delivered, speak to the recipients of that product, and just get a bit of verification and do your digging. I actually watched a really interesting due diligence webinar a week or so ago, and it was really, they were going onto company's house, they were looking at the directorships that mentor held, and how the fluidity of the businesses that they're directors of, and it was quite a thorough, helpful way of using company's house and things like that to check really that this person is as successful as they claim to be, because there's case after case of claims being made, particularly on social media, and it's just not true. So I think speak to people, reputation, do your background checks, definitely, and try to tune into your gut instinct as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on the whole gut instinct thing, because yeah, for me, I needed to make sure that I could get on with my mentor. Yeah, number one, I didn't want someone who was going to really annoy me at the way they kind of delivered material or supported me. So it took me a long time. I mean, there was probably 9 or 10 touch points, and there was a lot of talking and back and forth. And I was never, you know, I was never ever forced to kind of sign up. There was never a hard sale there. In fact, it was, they kind of never, they did follow up, but it was never to the point of where some people follow up, where it's just like, oh, you know, we'll do you a great deal if you sign up today. It was none of that. And that's at that point I realized, you know, I want to work with this person. I've spent a lot of time with this person, and, you know, they are doing what they say they're doing. And I think for me, it helps as well that, that she's a lady as well, because for me, I feel there's a lot more structure. She actually cares about what she does, and it's not wishy-washy, so to say. It's proper KPIs, everything's measured, adopting good habits. And some of the things my mentors help me do is get some structure, because I'm one of those people that will start projects and just go on a gut instinct and think, you know what, I'm going to do this, I don't really care, I know it's going to work out. Or I kind of think, oh, you know, it might work out, it might not work out, but I'm confident it will. So she's really helped me get some back-end structure and kind of get me kind of caged in almost to kind of think in a different way. So I'm with you on that thing, that your gut's got to feel right about a mentor before you take them on.
Yeah, she sounds awesome. But I think your point about spending time with that person to understand them is really good, because you will be speaking to this person every week, meeting them every couple of weeks or month, or whatever you arrange. So it's really, really important. But I think actually the precious sell is a really good telltale sign of not, because they're in it to sell. They're not in it to improve your life or add value. They're in it to add numbers to their own pockets. So I think, yeah, as you say, we've talked about what to look for, but also what to look against, and so to speak. And a hard sell is definitely something. If there's a reason, you know, if there's a time pressure, that would definitely turn me off. And I know that turns, you know, investors off investing in particular deals. It's that, don't pressure me. Allow me to make my own judgments.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So my next question to you is, I want to talk to you about mindset. Something you said earlier, where you said you kind of doubted yourself. What would you say helped you then build a strong mindset, and build a mindset where you could, you know, do what you were planning on doing, or do what you'd been taught to do?
So many things. So many things. And I think there isn't, that for me, certainly there hasn't been one particular kind of moment or thing. It's just been layer upon layer of things. So I've got quite a strong daily routine, although actually I have to confess I haven't been doing it as much in the last couple of weeks because I've had too much to do, which is exactly the reason that you should do it. And I felt more stressed than usual. So the daily routine involves kind of exercise. It involves, so my morning routine of kind of taking some time for myself, doing a bit of yoga, doing a bit of meditation, journaling, gratitude listing, goal writing in the morning, and then at the end of the day, reflecting on what I've done that day towards my goals. So that, because a lot of women do, because this is about women property, a lot of women chastising, I should have done this, a lot of chastising, a lot of I should have done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done enough, I haven't been good enough at this. But if you actually spend a few minutes at the end of the day going, today it's my today I list, and then I did this, I did this, I did this, and I'm like, wow, I did loads today. And then you go to bed feeling really satisfied with yourself and really proud that you are moving forward, whether it's inching or running, you're moving forwards. I haven't been doing that as much recently, and I have felt the difference. I'm part of I've switched yoga for a bit of a 7 a.m. HIIT accountability group at the moment, which is fun. But so definitely routine, surrounding myself with people much more closely who I'm part of a couple of female property networks. And one I'm particularly closely connected with is called the 𝗲𝗄𝘅𝗍𝗄 Sisters, and I expect you'll be a few of us will be featuring on your show. But that's what I've realised from that is vulnerability isn't just mine; everybody has it, and by having it, I'm not weaker or worse at something than somebody else. I just didn't know everybody else felt it too, and that kind of realisation that I'm not less capable. I'm just equally as capable, but everyone, there is the ability to push through the vulnerabilities and the doubts and the questions. That gives confidence in itself. Getting annoyed with not making as much progress as I thought I would, and going, oh, just get on with it. That's been a push. And having my job not necessarily, I was made redundant a couple of years ago, and that made me think, okay, that was a bit of a pivot in terms of thinking, how much can I control of my own life here, which of course the answer is everything, but what am I going to do about that, and how am I going to restructure things? So there's been lots of things. So network, belief, annoyance, enough now. And I do read a lot. I do a lot of self-development, and yeah, that's all probably factored into it.
I love how you talk about a morning routine, because I have a strong morning routine as well. Like yourself, it involves meditation, it involves gratitude and prayer, because I think you often forget that you've actually got you've got so many good things in your life that you're not really thankful for. You're always kind of looking and thinking, oh, I've got to do this, I want to do this. But if you take a moment just to step back and you think, you know what, I'm actually really grateful for this particular person in my life. For me, I'm really grateful for my 2 sons, and it's little tiny things that you acknowledge every day, and you sit there. And I do that first of all. Well, no, actually, I start with maybe 15 minutes of meditation, where first thing in the morning, I just want that space for myself. And I try to explain it to people, and I say it's really, really weird when you start, because your mind's all over the place. It's wandering. It's thinking about fire doors. It's thinking about bathrooms. But then as you go on, something really weird happens. It kind of, your mind just gets lifted to a certain place. And those 15 minutes are just so special, because when you finish and you open your eyes, it's almost like, I'm ready to start the day now, I'm ready to go. You've taken that time, you've not looked at your phone, you haven't jumped straight into work. And then off the back of that, I'd normally start with a little run or a gym session or something, because then you physically got yourself going. And then, you look at your watch and you think, God, it's only 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. I've done so much. I'm winning. I'm really winning.
You feel like such a boss. Like this today. So this morning, for example, so we started recording this at 9:30 in the morning, and me and Chris were like, so we've been for a run, we've done our exercise, we've been to the builder, we've spent an hour and a half with the builder, we're coming back now for this, it's 9:30 in the morning, we are winning at life today, you know? So yeah, it does make you feel great, and then it gives you momentum into the rest of your day. Planning as well, time planning is a massive thing. You know, aligning my goals with my actions and actually diarising things that are specifically targeted to a certain goal, that's actually also made a big difference. So I'm a big planner, and, you know, making sure that if, you know, this quarter I want to attract a certain number of deals, a certain number of amount of investment, a certain number of new partners, a certain number of opportunities, whatever they are, actually, okay, breaking it down and going, that's going to require this much effort of me on these focused areas. I'm doing that on Monday, that on Wednesday, that on Sunday, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And that actually was a massive mechanism when I was full-time employed in a very strict structure as well.
I think
I don't know how I jumped from what we were just talking about to that, but somehow in there was a logical connection from what you said before.
Yeah, my daily routines and going into. I'm with you. I think you need to plan your day, because if you don't plan your day's going to plan it for you, and you know you're probably going to end up having an unproductive day. So, like yourself, I need to plan my day, because I've got children, I've got to spend time with my wife, I've got to do things, and you think, you know what, it needs to be there. And it's almost quite sad, because my wife says to me, she goes, you have everything planned to the nearest 30 minutes. And it's like, look, it's not because I'm, you know, anal about it, or I'm, you know, I'm kind of fixated with it. It's just that I need to make sure those slots are done, and I'm protecting my time, because when I do sit down in the evening, I want to make sure that I've done everything that I've, you know, said I was going to do.
And do you always get to the end of the day having done what you said you were going to do?
Not all the time, no. Sometimes I might only get 70% in or 60% in, but then, like you say, Jess, you look back at the day and you think, you know what, maybe I overestimated that day, because I got a hell of a lot done. So my to-do lists have gone from being quite long to being probably about 4 or 5 really focused, in-depth tasks that work on the business rather than little nitty stuff. And one of the things I've done is I've turned off all notifications on my computer when I'm working, because you know what it's like. Instagram goes, Facebook goes, email goes, and then you're like, oh, I've got to check that someone said this, or what's he talking about? What's this person talking about? So you really have to plan your time. And I think it starts as early as when you get up and how you get yourself into the correct mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
How important is fitness to you?
Really important, because I think for a few reasons, running gives me great ideas. And like, you know, if I'm angry, I need to do exercise. If I'm frustrated, I need to move and kind of do something quite physical. So like, you know, one time me and my boyfriend had a row, so I left the house and I went to the climbing wall, and I came back, I was completely rational and ready to, you know, talk about the thing again, you know. Or if I've faced something difficult, I can feel in my mind when I haven't run for a while or moved for a while, definitely. So I think it's about mental health in a massive way. And also I think it's about your standards and your level of commitment. I think, you know, there is that phrase, how you do one thing affects how you do everything. I think if I let myself down on this, what else is it okay to not do? So, you know, yeah, I think mental health and standards and commitment, I think it's all of those things. And feeling great, I feel happiest when I feel strong and healthy, and that comes from, you know, exercise and diet. That's when I feel happiest.
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately I say to people, look, no one's going to love you like you're going to love yourself. And sometimes you have to be a bit selfish and just, you know, spend some time on yourself developing. You know, do some self-development, because, you know, as much as your wife loves you or your husband loves you, ultimately no one will love you as much as you love yourself or give yourself that self-care. So it's very important mentally, physically, and like you say, through your diet as well, to be you know, to be prepped to be the right person you want to be moving forward.
That's interesting. I think some people would hear you say no one will love you as much as yourself, and some people would pause on that, I think, and think about that. I just think that's an interesting statement. Yeah,
because, you know, I suppose it was kind of like, you know, self-reflection for me when I lost my business, looking in the mirror and making that realization and saying to myself, look, James, you can't blame anyone. this ultimately is your fault. You know, when things go wrong, it's your fault. When things go great, it's your fault. You need to be fully accountable to yourself.
Yeah.
And it was very, very painful for me to do that.
Yeah.
But now, you know, when something goes wrong, I know how to deal with that emotion because my mind's been there before.
Yeah.
And I can look at myself and say, no, this is your fault. Stop blaming other people. This is your fault.
Yeah.
But then, like you say, when things go great, when I completed a marathon, I look in the mirror and say, James, you're the man. You've done this. You know, you said you were going to do this. Have some self-love, you know, love yourself, because everybody else is going to say, yeah, it's a great achievement. But you, in deep down, you know how much of a great achievement it was. So
yeah.
It took me a long time to kind of be a little bit selfish and spend some time on myself and love myself. Because like you say, you kind of forget to do that, and you forget to take care of your mental state as well.
Yeah.
You can get up in work quite a lot. And all these little things play a kind of massive impact towards it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Jess, I want to ask you some questions in relation to women in property, and in particular, when you started in this field, have you ever felt any gender discrimination? It's a prominently man field where you got a lot of men in contracting, you got a lot of men as brokers. Have you ever felt that yourself personally, where you may have been talked to differently or looked at differently, or a contractor thought, a lady, I can charge her what I want?
Do you know what? It actually hasn't. Yes, I have, but not in a building site context. So in a building site context, any kind of vulnerability or opportunity that a trades will have seen in me will have probably come more from my inexperience, you know, to start with, not really knowing, you know, the technical, well, anything really. So it probably came more from that than the fact that I was a woman. And also at the time I started, I lived in London, and I think there was a lot of, oh, you're another London investor coming up here, whatever. So I think that those two factors were probably more of an opportunity for treating me differently than my gender. But the environment that I have definitely felt it has been in networking. And, you know, a lot of the time that I was going, this isn't necessarily always the case, and I think it's changing, but I often felt certainly physically outnumbered in networking scenarios, and then perhaps treated a little bit differently, or not quite taken as seriously in a networking situation. So that has been noticeable, and I think probably compounded by the fact that I felt was outnumbered, made me feel a little bit more vulnerable. So that probably was a bit of a confirmation bias of the fact that if someone was not giving me eye contact or including me in a group conversation as much, I probably noticed it more for feeling that I was outnumbered physically. But yeah, that situation much more than actually a building site. But it's just not pleasant to have to fight for your place somewhere, certainly. But I think that's becoming less the case, and I think a lot of women in property are starting to club together and make a bit of noise together to say we're here and we do great stuff, so include us, or we're going to include ourselves. Actually, it's not really a permission thing, it's just happening. So yeah,
it's weird that you say that, because a few of the ladies that I've spoke to have said the same thing. Networking events seem to be where blokes are just there saying, oh, I've done this, you know, I'm in this development and I'm doing this. And, you know, somebody we know mutually actually said it. She kind of said to me the other day, she goes, I'm standing there listening to the shit coming out of this guy's mouth thinking, I'm working on projects that are 10 times bigger than you, and you're kind of just brushing me off as just a lady who's at this event.
Yeah, I totally empathize with that feeling. But also, women don't want to network like that. We don't brag, we don't show off and peacock to each other. That's not how we do. We're interested in each other, we ask what each other are doing, and we look for ways, I think, well, certainly in the networks that I'm in, we look for ways to connect helpful people or support each other in that. We don't network to tell, we network to offer and support, as I say, in my experience. So it's entirely different. So in a room where people are going, I've done this, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't want to stand there and go, this is all the stuff I've done, please tell me that I'm great. I wouldn't want to do that. So again, being in an environment which doesn't have the same kind of conversation is another reason why that doesn't quite gel.
I'm with you networking events, I kind of feel I'm very much a people person. I like to talk to people. I like to find out what people do. So when I'm at a networking event, it may start with a couple of people talking, then you get other people just kind of hover and join the group. And I'm of the mindset that, you know, if somebody is coming in and joining the group, I want to stop and just put the light on them and say, hey, who are you?
Bring them in.
What are you
Yeah,
doing?
bring them in.
You know, and don't, because it, you know, we've all been there. I've been at networking events when I first started, and you feel really, you almost feel like, oh man, why are they not including me? I'm here for the same reasons.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot just to stop and say, hey, who are you? 9 times out of 10, you don't even have to ask their name because it's on the name badge, you know?
Yeah.
So
It's
I'm very
true.
much about including everybody. And whenever I engage in conversation, I want to know about the person before what you do.
Yeah.
And I've made some really, really great friends from networking events. And it's nice because once you go to a few, you become a face that everybody recognizes. And I suppose my face is one that you don't forget, do you? Brown guy with a beard.
No, definitely, definitely. I do think it's about the people there, and you know, I suppose that again links to validation, because, you know, if you think, oh, I'm only successful and worth being in your conversation if I've done a certain number of things, and so again, that you'd never know the value of a person. That might not come from an obvious place. The value of a person is a horrible thing. I'm sad that I just said that, but you don't know how you might be connected or helpful, you know, in a reciprocal way to each other by the judgment of, oh, you've done no deals, or you've done 100 deals, or whatever, or you make X. You know, you never know. That it shouldn't be taken at face value.
No, I'm with you. So, Jess, HMOs seems to be your main strategy here.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future of the HMO market? I've had mixed opinions from a lot of people scaremongering. What do you say? Post-COVID, what's going to happen with HMOs?
That's a massive question, because HMOs come in all different categories and there's all different shapes and sizes of HMOs. I think, oh God, I don't know how to start answering that question, but I think there will still be demand for HMOs is the first and foremost thing that I want to say. In a professional capacity, I'm talking about first and foremost, because I work in professional HMOs at the moment. I think there will still be capacity. I think that as jobs are becoming a little bit more transient, people will move around a little bit more, and that will drive demand for HMOs. I think as people are downsizing and changing what they can afford, HMOs will remain popular. But we have to consider, you know, financing of HMOs, and I think banks are being a lot more well, I don't think banks are being a lot more cautious about HMO funding, so I think that will change how we assess HMOs and this kind of financial structure of deals. I am glad to see that out of COVID, and there's a lot more of a spotlight on social housing category of HMOs and vulnerable tenant category. I'm really glad to see that. It's an area that I've been looking at for a while, and I've been working with a housing provider not in property, as a board director for a while, trying to understand that industry, because I want to move into that now in property. So I'm really pleased to see that has had a spotlight shone on it. Sadly, I think that a lot of HMO landlords are moving into that sector for financial reasons, for the security. But if it ends up in the same end result of more provision, solving that problem, whilst the morals aren't quite there, the output and the supply increasing is a great outcome from that. A lot of people are talking about student HMOs, and, you know, the fact that universities are partially closing for a certain amount of time, or we don't know about the timings of the reopenings, and that's giving some people fear factor for their student HMO portfolio building. I personally would continue. I don't own any student HMOs at the moment, but I'm continuing to look for the right opportunities in student HMOs, because, you know, going to uni. Well, I think everyone who's been to uni, who's listening to this, will know that going to university isn't about studying 100%. You want life experience, let's put it that way. You know, so you want the experience of life and living away, and it's that perfect bridge from home to independent living as an adult, and the fun of it. And, you know, used to get up to all sorts in our student HMO. Let's be honest, it was awful. But yeah, I think so. The demand will be there from a student perspective, just because of lifestyle wishes, and universities will reopen, and are reopening. So yeah, I think all there, but it just, we need to be more thorough and in how we're assessing deals, in terms of, and working more closely with the lenders, I think, as well, on what values they're giving and what areas and all that kind of thing. Lots more consideration and less assumption, less just taking things for granted, I think.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people,
Yeah.
a couple of people that you've spoken are focusing, I think the size of HMO is a thing as well. In terms of, are you looking at the mini-mos, the sort of just like 6-7 beds? Are you looking at the 20 beds? So I think there's a lot of people making decisions in that kind of, on those lines as well.
I mean, I know my personal strategy, I never go above a 6-bed. I just feel it's on the right kind of medium where 6 students can get together. Or it's, even when we rent to contractors, we find it's normally 5 to 6 contractors that rent together. And it's just a nice, manageable size, and you can get a decent, you get decent rooms, decent living space when you create a 6-bed out of a kind of 2-3 story house. Whereas I think when you start going bigger and try and do that in a house, you start becoming one of those cheeky landlords who's trying to split up and starts looking at minimum sizes and thinks, okay, this is just on the verge, or this is just under, I'll see if the council will approve it. So yeah, for us, it's always been 6 beds because it's just a number that works nicely and has done in the past.
Yeah. And what are you thinking? Are you gonna change anything about what you're doing? Or are you keeping?
I think for myself, it's we've got a multiple strategy with HMOs. I mean, our most recent project that we're just about to get into is predominantly for students, because the houses are 300 meters from the university. That's partly the reason why we went into it. But again, we've spoken to our lettings agent, and she said to us, in her last 30 years of experience in the area, she could quite easily fill that with contractors, professionals. So she's confident she would have a tenant for it, and that makes me more confident. Yeah. But then it's, again, like you say, there's that whole social aspect as well, where vulnerable people, or handing it over to a housing association or whatever. So we're thinking more in the sense that we're planning with way more exit strategies on these, rather than just thinking it's a student HMO and we'll be absolutely fine. And what I'm finding is we're having to leave a lot more money in a deal as well. Whereas previously we weren't. And I think people are silly when they say, oh, no money in deals, because I've only ever been able to do that once, and that's been in a rising market in London where I built a new house. Other than that, I've always had to leave money in a deal.
Yeah, and I think that makes it hard sometimes when people promote that all the time, because speaking to investors and setting expectations about not all, the majority of deals that I'm doing are going to have some money left in, and some investors or potential investors that I've spoken with, that's not their expectation based on whatever limited knowledge they've got. So that can be very misleading. And also the expectation of all your deals being all money out deals are another reason why somebody starting in property would think that they're not doing it right. Like if you're or they're not, I don't know, it could be another confidence knocker for someone who's just getting started, who thinks that they're not finding good deals because there's money left in them, or there's too much, whatever that is, money left in them.
I think people, they overlook a deal as well, because I've said to people in the past, I said, okay, you've got £75,000 left in this deal, but it also generates you nearly £5,500 rent a month. When you take all your costs off, and you're still left with £2,800 in your pocket, or close to £3,000 for 75 grand left in. I go, when you work it out that way, that's a bloody good return, and you're sitting on a decent project there, and then you've got you've got 3 or 4 years before you've completely paid yourself back. You need to start looking at it in different ways. Don't just be blinded by what you hear out there by people saying, oh, no money in deals, get all your money out, you can do this, recycle your cash, because it doesn't always happen.
Yes, someone pointed out to me recently that often it's trainers who say that's possible, people who are selling courses. So that selling that dream. Yeah.
I always say, come and speak to me and I'll tell you that I've always left money in, apart from one that rose very quick, and it was in London, in a trendy part of London. That was my my little gem, but I don't think I'll ever see one of those come along again.
No, you know, great that you had it, but you know, probably, as you say, you know that that's not normal. So good to have the balance.
Jess, it brings me to the end of the podcast, but there's there's a couple of last questions I want to ask you. As we're focusing on women in property, what advice would you give to, say, you know, a young lady out there who's thinking about getting into property? She's worried she may not be taken seriously. She's worried that it's quite a man-heavy field. From your experience that you've had, what would your advice be to someone who's just sitting there on the borderline thinking, should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? Should I not?
I would say you can go on, do it. And just to seek the right type of people who will build you up and not make you feel inadequate or, you know, not treated equally. I would just say you definitely can. You just need to find the right support network around you, build the right support network around you, sorry. And if you aren't sure whether you can or you can't, you never know from thinking about it. So just give it a go. And if you can, then you'll realize when you can, you will be able to, then you'll just be able to keep going with it. So I think that's with anything. If you wonder whether you can or not, try and see, and then you realize that you can. And just believe that you can. You know, something that I know that I can. I know that I can. I finally, you know, realized that I am just as capable as anyone else who's doing all the things that I want to do. So just believe that you can, and it's true.
No, fantastic advice there. Jess, if you could go back to your 18-year-old self, what's 2 bits of advice you would give yourself?
Ooh, you sprung that one on me, James.
I've got one more that normally kicks people off, actually.
What 2 bits of advice? 18. I was probably quite cocky at 18. I would say build your life. This is looking back on how I then acted as a young adult. So build your life based on what you want for yourself, not what you think other people think you should do or would make other people feel happy if you did. That's number 1. And the other thing is probably what you want is out there, whatever that is.
No, that's some good advice. Lastly, this question throws everyone. What's one vice or guilty pleasure that you just cannot live without, something that you must do?
You know what? I'll probably, as soon as we get off the call, I'll probably think, oh my God, obviously it's that. There must be something like I feel awful that I can't think of a thing.
Maybe when you get to the end of the week, you've had a hard week, it's just something you got to do, or something, particular food.
I mean, I do have a bit of an issue with biscuits, but I don't know. I'm gonna have to come back to you because I can't think of there'll be so many things that I do that are ridiculous.
Please do, because I have had a few people message me after saying, oh, James, I should have said this, and then I can include it in the show notes anyway.
Yeah, do, because I can't. There will be. I'll just ask my boyfriend. He'll think of a million and ridiculous things that I do.
So, Jess, lastly, if anybody wants to connect with you or find out what you're doing, follow your journey, reach out, maybe ask you a question, if there's a young lady out there looking to get into property and she really connects with this podcast, where can they find you?
The channel that I'm on most is Instagram. I'm on Jess_Leader. Yeah, that's the place to find me best. But I would love for people to come and have a chat and find me.
No, that's great. Jess, thank you very much for joining me on the J2 Hub podcast. I really appreciate your time. I know you were super busy today. And I know this will get some really good listens, because, you know, when you've recorded a few and you just think, oh, that was a great one, or that was not so great, but you know, I think you've given some very valuable information in there, and you know, I reckon it's going to connect with some not only young ladies out there, but some, you know, people on their journey having certain issues, kickstarting and getting started, because you've come out with some really, really good stuff there to start with. So thank you once again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed talking with you so much. It's been really great.
Thank you, Jess.
All right, take care.